So I'm recording this segment after the fact, but one thing that I forgot to realize, or forgot to say, that I realized that I didn't say, and this is going to seem a little bit counterintuitive for some of the points made in the video, but it is to act as autistic as humanly possible. In order to embrace the multiplicity of your mind and to be more confident in general, is just to embrace your inner autist and say whatever it is that comes to your mind. That's kind of my humor style in the first place. I'm not very good when it comes to overly practiced or thought out humor. It tends to be much more spontaneous and absurd. Being absurd is kind of my general style. Um, but yeah, just be really autistic. Embrace the part of you that doesn't know how to be social in order to be social. That has been surprisingly successful for me. Um, and it's really fun too. I just like wording things from the heart in an autistic way. Because a lot of the like wording for things in my own head sounds really autistic and like sounds like it's not using language the way that a normal human being would, and almost like a child. Like a lot of my inner voice sounds like a child, and then other times it sounds really lexical like a computer. It sort of oscillates between those two different forms. I mean, it oscillates between a lot of different forms, but those are like the main two. And I like sounding like an autistic child. I think one of my biggest problems is trying to be the same person all the time. Now, I used to be much worse about this. I would create a conception of an identity like, I don't know, I want to be a quote unquote good person. So I'm going to try and do as many things as a good person would do and be as much of one as I can. I'm going to base every everything about what I like in media, who I am, what I say, the way I talk. I'm going to try to be as much of a good person as I can because that's the right thing to do. Um, and then, in order to perpetuate, quote unquote, good behavior, I would try to do everything I could to form my identity and sense of self-worth around being good. Um, of course, the problem with this is that, no one is just one person all the time. No one has one set of feelings all the time. No one has one set of behaviors all the time. And so naturally, this identity begins to crack. And as that identity begins to crack due to the circumstances that you're in, leading to other behaviors, confusion, etc., um, the severity of the situation or complexity of the situation varies from person to person, but regardless, push is going to come to shove, and something, however minor, is going to change. And then you're going to feel different. You're going to act different, and the way you act is going to be separate from your established identity. That identity will then be contradicted. This is the distinction that's made between personality and identity. Because with identity, it's how you view yourself. It's the consistencies that you recognize as something that's eternally part of you and that you will continue acting out as a result of them being a part of you. Personality, however, is more to do with what continually happens, like really happens, because identity is filtered through your own lens, through your personal perspective. It's inevitably going to be colored by your biases. There's a degree to which the things about yourself that may not be so pretty, or in the opposite direction, may be really good, depending on what your self-worth is and what traumas you have going on, are going to be ignored. And as a result of those things being ignored, you will form an incomplete identity. A lot of things about it may be real, but because you're ignoring memories, I mean, even in the way that you recall memories, like a lot of the time when we recall memory, it's not as accurate as it was in real life, because we choose, like, we will choose which aspects of it to remember just by emphasis. We'll emphasize the things that we may really like or we may really not like, subconsciously or consciously, depending on the circumstances, depending on what specific triggers you may be suppressing or not. Um, you're going to end up with a different result. And there may be something fundamental about those memories that you're suppressing that end up, having a particularly important impact on the development of your personality. And because you're not acknowledging those things, you form an identity around the result that would have existed if those things didn't happen. And that identity is reflective of what you would like to be, what you would like to see yourself as, but it's not really who you are, which is what the personality is, what you actually do. And what you actually do is reflective of the experiences that you may be suppressing or simply not remembering, being unwilling to talk about, to think about. Of course, it's multifaceted. Human beings have free will. There's a difference between involuntary and voluntary action. Um, but the what ultimately consists of our free will is also consisting of everything that preceded it. It's cut from the cloth of your experiences prior. Um, and that's going to influence the outcome of your free will, even though you will be exerting it. And so, keeping all of that in mind, um, what was I gonna say? I actually forgot the point of this clip. I was gonna say something about identity formation. I forgot the point of this clip. There was a point. I don't remember what it was. See, this is this is a micro identity crisis, I guess you could say right now, is that um, my memory is so bad that I keep trying to record videos all the time, and that ability that I used to have to just like flow into idea to idea and go to all of these ever-branching paths, and just keep going on and on and on, and then remembering what train of thought I began with to then expand on it, that ability's gone. Can't do that because I forget everything before I can get to that point. I just keep clarifying and expanding on the information that I present, um, as a addendum to the broader point that I'm trying to make, and then I lose that broader point, and then I forget it. Um, oh, I remember now. See, you just have to walk along the path long enough to find out where you began, and then once you find out where you began, then you're going good. Multiplicity is what I was going to talk about, the multiplicities of one's identity. So, I would like to see myself as a socially applicable person, or applicable. I was thinking affluent. That's what I would like to be. If not socially affluent, then just someone who is funny. Someone who, when you speak to them, you like being around them. You think they have interesting things or good things to add to the conversation. Um, you think they're cool. And whenever I talk to someone, I always have this lingering sense that they're going to realize that I'm not any of those things. I always have this lingering sense that I'm going to fuck up somehow, I'm going to say something wrong, I'm going to make some kind of mistake that, makes me look bad. And this sort of thinking like pervades all aspects of my life, like even how like I look at other people, because I'll see someone say something like cringeworthy or something that doesn't seem like it had much thought put into it, or something that like sounds dumb, or doesn't like work well socially in a conversation. Like you look at it and go, this doesn't work well here. Like I'll look at stuff like that all the time, and then I'll just cringe, like not at the person as in I'm going to laugh at you, but more feel bad for them because of the judgment that they're probably getting at that point. It's not like I'm judging them. It's more like because I'm around them, I'm feeling bad for them, and also feeling that maybe all, like maybe my influence, maybe my influence as a person is causing some of this. That's sort of a lesser known thought that I have. I don't think about that much because that's sort of a particularly narcissistic road to go down. But yeah, I feel like a bad influence a lot of the time. Um, and so I I don't know, like at the end of the day, the way other people think about you shouldn't matter that much, but because humans are social animals, even for someone like me who has a very individualistic mindset, someone who does not like to play to any one particular. Yeah, very individualist mindset. I don't like to associate with any ideologies or fit into any particular side of the spectrum at my own detriment because someone from every group dislikes me because I don't fall into any group. Um, because of that, I'm not doing myself any favors in terms of being liked. But there are people who I respect and who I like, who I don't, I don't want to, um, I don't, I want them to stay around. Uh, as someone who's lost a lot of friends in the past, I really don't like the feeling of, or the idea rather, at this point, the feeling has dulled so much because, you know, I'm older now and it's happened enough times that like it doesn't really, you don't really feel anything. Well, you feel something, but you don't feel anything near what you used to. Um, but there's still that like lingering anxiety of like I have to not screw this up the way that I screwed up other friendships. I have to do the right thing, etc. It's just be cool. But other people don't think like this. And I think it was because I was traumatized by one friend I had who told me that by the time that I turned 18, I was going to end my own life. And this person, I was talking to them like every day for like a year and a half or something. And I met them in real life. And so it really fucked me up, like hardcore when that happened. It took me like months to process that. And I think that's probably why like anyone who I sincerely like respect and care about, I try as hard as I possibly can to not screw it up. Um, Not to say that I haven't screwed things up after that happened. I definitely did, but it was uh, it was an even more painful reminder and traumatic. What do we say? Traumatic kickback into reality. A rude awakening. Let's say. And so since since I was beefing with No Thank You in like, I want to say August, and then that lasted for a, like, like 2 weeks. It did not even last that long. It lasted like a month at most. I don't even remember. Yeah, I think it was basically about a month. And then, we became friends again, and then everything was fine, and that was like some of the only beef I had that year, and it was resolved pretty quickly. Now he and I are really good friends. And it was over something really silly, like not even anything serious. Um, it's just a political disagreement that I had overreacted to because I was in a really bad place at the time. Um, and also a member of a cult. So, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from beefing with people in the past that it just ain't worth it. But the extent to which that's influenced me has gone beyond simply keeping the peace. I think it's also made me deeply, like chronically anxious about my standing with other people or about how I'm being perceived. And when I do say something wrong, it breaks into me. It breaks into me in a way that I can deal with because I have those previous experiences of not being able to deal with it, but it still hurts, you know? That avoidance comes from trauma, but that ability to deal with it also comes from trauma. You see how the needle's being threaded now? Um, so, uh, it's a difficult tightrope to walk because like no one knows what your internal state is. Only you know what your internal state is. And if you tell someone your internal state, it's kind of like, well, what the fuck do you expect them to do? You know, everyone, everyone is ultimately operating on their own self-interest. That's the way it should be. That's the way it always has been. That's the only way it's ever gonna be. And so it's not like you can just sort of pity someone into being friends with you. And I wouldn't want to do that anyway, because that would feel wrong. It wouldn't feel genuine, you know? Um, but it's more like, I feel like that constant sense of anxiety is noticed by people. Even if I'm not presenting insecurities like this in video form, I feel like it would be noticed by people. Just in like the way that like I'll start stuttering all of a sudden like a whole bunch, or like repeating myself like 5 times when I get nervous. Um, I'm sure there are people who would notice these things over time. But the thing about people is that they have good days and bad days. They have moments when they say bad things and good things. They have moments when they're funny and when they're just trying to make a joke and the joke doesn't land. They have moments when they can't think very well, when they're not putting out the most interesting ideas, when they can't entertain 24/7 like a radio host, when they're going up and down, when they're just normal. And that's because you can never be, one thing for that duration of time. Like, you can't just be one thing forever. You are multiple. Um, and I think I would be a lot less insecure if I weren't so obsessed with projecting an identity that is consistent. The identity that is consistent being someone who is continuously funny, someone who always has interesting rants and things to say, someone who is constantly, coming up with new ideas for topics of discussion, always having something unique and interesting to say. And I've been slowly getting the pieces of this problem conveyed to me over the last, couple weeks or so, when I was telling a friend of mine that I wouldn't want to do like a book club type thing, because if I did, I would just be I would just be relaying the plot back to you, or I wouldn't have any particularly interesting analysis to add. And they told me, like, discussions don't need to be like an in-depth analysis. When people are talking, they just add what they have to add. They just say what they felt about the thing. It doesn't have to be majorly in depth. It's just friends just want to talk to each other. Um, and I thought that was a really nice thing to say, but because I know all people are motivated by their own self-interest, and everybody who exists is never completely self-aware, never completely understanding themselves and how they feel, I looked at that and I went, well, how the fuck do I know if that's true? Like, how do I know? How do I know that what you're saying right now is not something that you're going to renege on later on and then find out that, everything I have to say is so cringeworthy that you just don't put up with me? Um, how do I know that? And knowing me, knowing me. I'm talking about the multiple people, and now all of a sudden I'm talking in singular linear terms. Knowing knowing the self one of the selves that I possess that seems to veer its head out into the open and influence many of my, in quotations, behaviors so often. It is likely that I will jump into distrust uh, of someone's assessments of me quicker than I will jump into comfort and agreement and reassurance. If someone says anything positive about me, I will just not trust it. I won't believe them. And if someone tries to reassure me, to not be so anxious all the time about myself, I will just not trust them. And if I were to express that to someone, it would be frustrating because there they are, putting in all of this work to try and reassure me and make me feel better, and it is falling on deaf ears because the mechanisms in my brain keep me from believing them. Um, and so it feels like the infrastructure in my head is just broken. Like I always end up in the feedback loop of self-hatred and of distrust. Um, so how do you square that circle? I would assume by accepting the inherent multiplicity of life and saying that people will not always perform at 100% or even 80 or 70%, um, but that would require me accepting in the moment that I'm performing badly. And when you're hardwired to think of everything you say as a performance in the first place, that's going to be pretty hard because you kind of have to think of everything you're doing and saying as a performance when you feel like you as a person, the person who you view as your identity is just fundamentally bad, and that you're doing everything you can to obscure that perspective from being known. Your perspective that you view as true, that you're bad, you're doing everything you can to keep people from realizing that or coming to the same conclusion, or you know um, so you sort of have to feel like a performer, someone putting on masks in a way, because you feel like who you are and what you have to work with is just bad. And I really appreciate all of the comments that I got on my last video of people trying to be reassuring. It was, but it's going to take me a long time to break through this uh, feedback loop in my brain, negative feedback loop. I wish I would stop saying and so much.